Greetings from Ormond Beach, Florida, and welcome to another edition of the Charles Report. Today is Monday, October 10th, and just finished reading a couple of articles on the Ebola crisis. One in the on the World Socialist website that indicates that not much is really being done about this catastrophe in Western Africa, the three countries of Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. Um, it's really amazing, but there seems to be almost like a kind of malignant neglect here of these countries in terms of aid. A lot of, you know, all the aid that has been promised, very little of it has been given, and the only 70% of all beds within the hot zone are being managed by the French uh, Doctors Without Borders, the nonprofit organization Doctors Without Borders, and that they are not able to handle this crisis. Um, one wonders just how serious the rest of the world, the developed world especially, is about treating this uh, terrible disease outbreak. Um, it seems to me that the imperialist countries of Europe and America deserve to take some responsibility for the crisis there as a result of the fact that basically Africa was under the iron heel of European imperialism for 400 years. And of course, America was the world's only slave state of the modern era that enabled the ruling class here to establish sufficient capital um, to become the dominant force in the world. I don't think people really understand that. What had made America able to have a competitive edge vis-a-vis other countries in the world and become the supreme economic power that's become today, and it was slavery. It was the ability to reap enormous super profits off of slave labor, basically unpaid labor. And eventually slavery was abolished. Of course, it was abolished first within the British Empire. And there's even a theory about the American Revolution as a counter revolution against the abolition of slavery, that was on the cards more or less during the time in that same time frame. Although the laws hadn't actually been enacted yet, but Britain had already indicated that it was going to abolish slavery. And this is a theory. I'm not going to endorse it; just a theory. And that the American Revolution was the slave owners' attempt to hold on to their slaves. I think a couple of books have been written on that subject. I don't know if The People's History by Howard Zinn goes into that. I think maybe it's mentioned, but there was a recent book put out by a scholar from the University of Houston, I believe, and the title unfortunately escapes me. But nevertheless, what enabled the Western world to become the dominant power or civilization that it is, culture, civilization it is was the basically the exploitation of Africa and discovering Africa and exploiting it and basically dismembering it and exploiting it. Um, that's really what enabled the West to become the dominant force it is, and a lot of it was based on racism and the need to. It was based upon greed and capitalism, but um, this whole idea of separate races was a social construct that actually began in Virginia in the 17th century. I think there's an actual date that one scholar has given to this. It's in a book called The Invention of the White Race, and you can buy that book online. I believe Black Agenda Report has a link to it. And prior to a certain date, maybe let's say 1690 or thereabouts, the term race had never been used at all, except maybe human race, but the term had never come into common parlance. And it was invented as part and parcel of this idea of demeaning Africans and making it seem that they were subhuman and they were not at the level of Europeans. It was also meant to empower an overseer class that would be desensitized to the point where it could inflict the brutalities that they inflicted during the slave era. And that was the very beginning of this concept of a white race or race in general, as opposed to a lack of that social construct prior to this time. And it was Europe Western Europe that profited enormously from the slave trade because the U.S. and Europe, Western Europe, developed as basically as partners in trade. They developed together, and without the rape and dismemberment of Africa, the enormous material advantages that we in the Western world enjoy never would have accrued to us. So I think it's incumbent upon the Western world in particular, more so than China or Russia or any other country, to step up and make sure that this epidemic in Africa is handled appropriately, and it's not being handled appropriately. There are a lot of people who are floating some interesting theories in regard to this Ebola crisis. That's all part and parcel of a ruling class plan, a new global elites plan to transatlantic elite, I might add, transatlantic global elite, interested in controlling the world's population through wars and disease. And it is interesting that the U.S. ran probably one of the world's largest bioweapons programs up until the late 1980s or 1990s, early 1990s, when there was an international treaty banning the use of research on germ warfare. And I read a book I believe it was by Seymour Hersh, might have been by somebody else, on germ warfare and the bioweapons program in the U.S. And the research was done at the U.S. Army Germ Warfare Center at Fort Detrick in Maryland, and the idea was to weaponize various germs, viruses that existed within nature, but didn't really, it hadn't yet gone human to human in terms of transmission. And this theory about the African fruit bat being the source of the Ebola virus is not mistaken. I believe that is entirely accurate. The question is, was it the result of a bite by a fruit bat on a person, and that's what enabled the transmission to take place? And I find that theory rather I believe I have questions about that theory, and that was their initial point of origin, and there's no proof offered for that. It's just a theory put forward by the mass media and the mouthpieces of the power structure. But the fact of the matter is that research was conducted extensively on Ebola as a weaponized germ that could be passed human to human. And one wonders what happened to these biological germ stocks after the treaty was signed. Well, supposedly the cover story is this: that research continued, but along lines of how to find an antidote or a vaccine to these deadly plagues that actually appear to have possibly been invented by the Pentagon and others. I can't speak to what Russia's germ warfare program was, or any other countries, because I don't know anything about it. The only information I have is related to the U.S. Army biological weapons program at Fort Detrick, and so that's all I can speak to here. One wonders what happened to those germs. I mean, it's like the media. That story has gone dark, and it's become a taboo subject. If they spent enormous sums of money, if they so many years trying to develop a vaccine, you know, according to the cover story, then there should have been some results, but there are no results. And so I'm extremely confused about that. I mean, and rightfully so. I mean, because there is no explanation as to what Fort Detrick has been doing all these years with these germ weapon stocks. And another interesting aspect of this, that another question that I've got in my mind about the whole thing is, was that what I related to you earlier about Global Research, CA, Canada, had done a couple of stories. They were actually authored by someone from University of California, PhD person, so, you know, highly intelligent, literate, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what his specialty was. I think it was criminology. Saying that there's only two known strains of Ebola, and one that was a previous outbreak in the Congo, and this in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, where this disease had never been seen before. And these two strains are related, and they have a common ancestor, but the common ancestor has never been detected in nature. So that being the case, if it's not found in nature, then where is it found? You know, logically, it would have to say, well, it's certainly probably in a laboratory. It's found in a laboratory. I mean, where else if it's not found in nature? So there's an awful lot of questions involved with this Ebola outbreak, and you know, the willingness of power structures, the transatlantic elites to just sit back and watch this disease ravage Africa as a means of controlling the population, perhaps. And you know, that may sound overly judgmental, but I really think that it is logical if you take a look at the outsized promises that these countries have made for PR purposes, and the total lack of delivery of the aid to the hot zone. And then, you know, the United States, the power structure here, and their governing elites' use of the crisis there as an excuse to further militarize Africa, send in forces, and thus gain a competitive edge against the Chinese and the competition for Africa. So, you know, once again, Africa is a battleground for competing interests, and I think if the Western world wants to be honest with itself and the elites, but they would have to admit that the Western world owes Africa a debt of some sort that needs to be addressed right now, and if this situation is untenable and not something that people can live with, and it's a horror that needs to be addressed right now. So I don't want to you know, bum everybody out with that, with, you know, these, but you know, this reality has to be confronted, and only by confronting the facts can we really deal with the situation. And I think the situation is that we've got a transatlantic global elite that's trying to establish a global empire through the use of never-ending wars and whatever means, possibly even you know, germ warfare. Well, and you know, to establish a global empire that they can manage, you know, I think that we need to question their lack of a response and put it in stark terms, so that people really will understand the whole history of Africa and Western domination of Africa as the means of world dominance, the world dominance of the West, which I particularly think is coming to an end. But that's neither here nor there. I think it's coming to an end because the elites don't even have the sense to know how to look after their own best interests, let alone the rest of the world, you and I. Of course, that means we have to step up, we the people, and take responsibility for their reckless actions. So I want to wish you all a happy day, and think good thoughts, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.